something pretty important happened yesterday here in Houston or elsewhere. I don't know. But when it comes to the Houston sports scene and specifically the football team that plays here, your beloved Houston Texans. Yesterday, this isn't hyperbole. I don't want to make this hyperbole, but you should be excited about yesterday. You should, because legitimately, it's one of the most hype-worthy offseason moments in Houston Texans franchise history. This is not debatable. They interviewed Sean Payton for their vacant head coaching gig. And I know what some of you guys are doing. You're rolling your eyes. You're going to say Paul's trolling. Paul's being sarcastic. No, I'm not. Legitimately. This is one of the most hype-worthy moments in Texans offseason history. This isn't me being a douche. This is me highlighting how bad things have been.
We tried to brainstorm like other hype-worthy moments in Texans offseason, and the name Brock Osweiler came up very early in the conversation.
Did. Right. So we're going to go through a list of other moments because, again, this sadly is up there. But the Texans tweeted out yesterday, we have completed an interview with Sean Payton for our head coaching position. Then in a thread on Twitter, listed his very long resume. Most of his success, of course, coming with the New Orleans Saints. And Sean Payton has been doing a very good job doing public relations for himself. Yesterday, he also joined Colin Cowherd's radio show for a 30-minute interview. Towards the end of the interview, Cowherd started to press Sean Payton about what's happening for him as far as potential jobs. Say he takes the job this offseason. Say he is the head coach of another team for the 2023-2024 season. Here's Colin Cowherd specifically asking Payton about the possibility of coaching the Houston Texans.
Let's say it's a bad. Texans. It's a team they got to find a quarterback probably. Are you willing to consider that if you
absolutely?
Okay, you
Here's
would.
why. And look, I think I know the ownership group not very well, but we practiced against the Texans in New Orleans 4 or 5 different times. So Cal McNair, his late father, we'd see them, and so I don't know them well, but I know them. We've when you practice for 3 days with an opponent, you get a chance to meet a lot of the different personalities and people involved in the building.
Couple of things to note there. Payton specifically talked about the Houston Texans in this interview because Colin Cowherd was about to say, so bad organization. Hey, how about the Houston Texans? Right there, the reason that the Texans were specifically mentioned by Payton is not because we know that they are more of a favorite for him to land this coming season than the other teams. It's because Cowherd specifically asked about it. So don't make too much of it. And also note that Payton in that spot just said, well, I know some of the people that work there. I've had interactions with Cal McNair, owner of the Texans, previously Bob McNair, former owner of the Houston Texans, the late Bob McNair. But as Payton and his new media acumen began whirling, and as he continued speaking, he did start to talk up some of the perks of the Houston Texans.
They've got really good draft capital, Couple
good young players.
They're in a division that you can at least look at and say, all right, Indy, Tennessee, Jacksonville is nothing. But you can at least, all right, how do we? So I think there's growth potential immediately there from their 2 or 3 wins that they had this year.
2 or 3, because he doesn't remember the tie. But yeah, hey guys, they had 3 wins this past season. There is something to build off of there. Would Sean Payton be interested in the Houston Texans if they hadn't won the last game of the season? All you draft pick people probably never thought about that one. Anyway, also important to note as he goes through that answer, the positive, he mentions the division, the AFC South. It sucks. If Peyton were to go to the Broncos, that division on paper is competitive. If he were to go to the Chargers, say they decide to fire Brandon Staley, same kind of deal. You got some tough teams in there. The Raiders, I think, at the very least, are somewhat competent, but we're going to see what they do at quarterback. He mentions the AFC South, and from a division perspective, yeah, it looks like the Titans are about to take a step back. The Colts are obviously in a rebuild mode, and I don't think the Jaguars are leaps and bounds above the rest of the division. Although it was good for that organization going forward to win on Sunday and say they do, Saturday night, and say they do pull off a victory against the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, totally different discussion. But Peyton highlighted some of the strengths of the job, and you do have a bunch of assets to work with. Over the course of this interview, too, Peyton laid out the fact that there are some draft picks that the Texans will have to work with. But he also said, and this is from conversations that he's had with Mickey Loomis, that as far as compensation goes, he's looking for a mid or late first-round pick. And that's what Mickey Loomis is looking for. That's what the Saints are looking for. That is something the Texans are going to have to consider moving on from. 12th overall pick. I do believe very strongly that using the 12th overall pick to trade for a great head coach is going to give you a better chance of success than rolling the dice on whoever falls to you at 12. I do. I think as far as long-term success goes, all right, a guy who maybe best case scenario plays for your team for 5 years, maybe he's an all-pro. That's the best case scenario, but worst case scenario, the guy stinks. He's off the roster in 4 to 5 years. Sean Payton is a culture setter. Sean Payton's a resetter. I do think you should be considering moving that pick that you got from the Cleveland Browns. It's currency. It's not a proven commodity, a draft pick. And I think there's too many people of you that are specifically online that believe that all draft picks hold a bleep ton of value. No, they don't hold as much as you think. So Sean Payton, in that interview with Colin Cowherd and that interview that he did with the Houston Texans yesterday, should have you excited. It should. It's fine. It's okay to admit you're excited about it. There's nothing wrong with that. And we will compare this to other moments where there was offseason hype for the Houston Texans. And again, it ranks pretty high. But my big question is, what's Peyton's end game here? What's he doing? Because, again, he's doing the media relations tour right now. I wonder if he'll do more interviews with somebody else, maybe at ESPN in studio or some other network. I know he works for Fox right now, so maybe that's not possible. But what is he getting at here? And I guess as far as good things go, the Cowboys win last night against the Bucs means the Cowboys are not a possibility for Peyton this offseason. We still have no idea what the Chargers are doing with Brandon Staley, but I think the fact that he's still the head coach of the team does bode well for him long-term. Could be wrong on that. If I were the Chargers, I would move on from him. I think that there's still some interest in the Miami Dolphins, but I also think that Mike McDaniel is safe. Is he up to something? Is he using the Texans as some sort of leverage to maybe make one of these teams pull off the shot in the back of the head of all shots in the back of the head? You know, like Tommy in Goodfellas when he thinks he's going to get made. Per Pro Football Talk, Peyton's only a 50-50 proposition to even return to the league for this coming season. So is Peyton up to something here? Is Peyton playing at something else? 713-780-3776 to call in. To text into on the most interactive sports talk show in Houston. You can join us in the Twitch chat, twitch.tv/ESPN975. You can also tweet me, at Gallant Says, at Sean A. Mapes Behind the Glass. We'll continue this discussion next. And yeah, this does rank pretty high as far as hype-worthy moments in Houston Texans offseason history. I want a legitimate reason as to why the Texans should say no to Sean Payton. Because the one that we get the most came from Twitch, twitch.tv/ESPN975. OG from H-Town says, am I the only one who thinks it's bleeping stupid to give up a first for a bleeping coach? OG from H-Town continues, Sean Payton is a bleeping quitter who ran like a coward once he lost his Hall of Fame quarterback. Continues, if Sean Payton was so bleeping good, he would have stayed in New Orleans and kept the franchise competitive. I don't think you could call a guy a quitter when he was there from 2006 on. If he was a real quitter, wouldn't he have quit right after Hurricane Katrina? Right? I mean, that was his first year there. Wouldn't he have said, you know what, I'm out, pull a Bobby Petrino? I don't think you could call him a quitter. I think you could say he's somebody who got burnt out in his 50s. And I think that there is a real question to ask about whether he'd be willing to get into a team that's clearly pressing the reset button. But in that interview with Colin Cowherd, Peyton said that, look, you can't really control the spots that end up being open for you, and that generally you're going to find yourself in a spot where there has to be some sort of a rebuild.
The teams that have openings, I'm not going to say are broken, but they've had problems. That's why there's an opening.
Right.
And so I think that element's critical, the ownership element, and philosophically, you know, because and I've said this, and I hope it's not looked at as an indictment on certain teams, but there are a number of teams. It's hard to win in this league, and it's certainly harder to win in this league if there's internal problems before you even play an opponent.
Right.
And that led to Cowherd asking, well, how about the Houston Texans? Because it does seem like they have a lot of them. And for whatever it's worth, we're talking about an interview, and coaches lie all of the time, but Peyton was complimentary of their situation. I think some people also might wonder whether or not Nick Caserio would be an obstacle to hiring Sean Payton. Well, doesn't seem like that's the case. Again, it's an interview. Peyton has become media savvy. He's going to know how to talk his way around giving his true thoughts on things, but doesn't sound like he has any animosity or disagreements with Nick Caserio, because he remembers Nick Caserio, who worked for the New England Patriots.
I know Nick a little bit, Caserio, because, again, when he was in New England, we had a lot of practices with their team. So each team would be just like we're having that discussion. There'd be pros, and that's the significance, though, of the upcoming week or two, of meeting some of these individuals, asking some questions, maybe some difficult questions, and trying to get answers so that we're not having difficult questions when you've already taken the job.
There will be some difficult questions as far as what they do with that second overall pick, assuming that they have to trade the 12th pick to get Peyton in town. He's going to have to figure out whether or not he can work with Nick Caserio, and that's something you're not really going to know probably until the draft process is completed and free agency as well. And sometimes we do see general managers get the boot after the NFL draft, because it doesn't really make sense to bring in somebody new when all of a sudden, you know, you're only a couple of weeks or months away from the draft. That person's put in a lot of work. It is weird, though, that you see the post-draft firings of general managers across the NFL from time to time. I do find it strange, but I get it. I get why it happens.
Was that Brian Gaine?
Brian Gaine, yeah. That one was weird. And again, that has a lot
Other
to do
stuff going on
with Bill O'Brien and everything that was happening behind the scenes. Right. I do think this is a better situation than it was then. But again, there's not a very high bar to clear.
Also, I do think it's worth noting that Sean Payton did this interview at probably like 12:30 Central Time, and then the Texans tweeted out that they completed their meeting with Sean Payton at like 6:30.
Right.
So there's a good chance he got off this Fox set, walked into a conference room, and just immediately got on Zoom with Nick Caserio. So it wasn't like he was going to tell Colin Cowherd, like, Caserio, kind of sucks.
Right. But that could have happened. That could have happened a couple of hours later.
Happened.
That's certainly a possibility, because the interview took place before the Texans' actual interview. I don't know if the Texans flew out to see Sean Payton since he was doing the interview with Colin Cowherd in person. I imagine that he was in Los Angeles. I don't know if the Texans did a Zoom interview. I do think that matters. The Texans should have sent somebody out there to do it one-on-one. I hope that at the very least Nick Caserio was there, if not both Nick Caserio and Cal McNair, whatever. I don't know the specifics on that front. But I do think that this is worth getting excited about. It is. The possibility of Sean Payton ranks very high among offseason moments of hype for this franchise. And I actually went back and I looked. And again, not a very high bar to clear. 2002. You have a team. So, of course, there's going to be some offseason hype there. That probably trumps the possibility of Sean Payton as head coach. 2006, you got the first overall draft pick, and people are excited that the Texans are going to draft either Vince Young or Reggie Bush. Whoops. That didn't happen. And it's not to say Mario Williams was even a bad player.
It was the right pick, but in the moment, people were not happy.
I don't know that it was the right pick, but it's a pick that worked, if that makes sense.
He had the best career out of all those guys.
True. To an extent. I think Reggie Bush was ahead of his time. I think Reggie Bush in today's NFL would be amazing because teams would find ways to get him the ball in as many ways as they possibly could.
And you know who utilized him really well?
Sean Payton. Bringing it full circle, Sean Mapes. 2007. Not only did they trade 2 second-round picks for Matt Schaub, they also signed Ahman Green, Packers Pro Bowl running back. I'm not going to lie. This one made me laugh very hard. I saw a post on the Houston Texans website from 2007. Ahman Green rushing past the hype. This was before the Texans season opening game against Larry Johnson and the Kansas City Chiefs. And Larry Johnson was coming off of an 1,800-yard season. And the beginning of this piece for Texans.com says, Texans running back Ahman Green is a 4-time Pro Bowler who rushed for 8,491 yards and 54 touchdowns in 9 seasons. From 2000 to 2004, he ran for more yards and had more total yards from scrimmage than any running back in the NFL. But he's not the back people are talking about as the Texans prepare to host Kansas City at Reliance Stadium on Sunday.
How great is this? How great was 2007? That
a lot of hype
for 2 running backs.
Ahman Green and Larry Johnson for this game.
And then Green is quoted saying, I'm going to make sure I play the best that I can play. And I know if my team, myself, and Ron Dane in the backfield can outrush their offense for doing our jobs. Ron Dane. What a great article.
I love the end. For Green, it's not about hype or stats. Beating Kansas City comes down to executing on the field. Okay. 2012, a moment of hype. Remember when Peyton Manning was supposedly interested in the Texans? And they shot him down. Remember, though, he was interested. I remember this because that was during my first year doing sports talk radio. I remember, hand up, saying, well, I don't really want nearly headless Peyton Manning.
I also thought he was cooked.
Yeah, I thought he was cooked. Because, again, I thought his head was hanging on to his neck by a hinge. Now, maybe there's some reasons that grew back on a little bit more properly. I don't know. Let's ask a couple of those private investigators that Peyton Manning sent out to a nondescript home to do a little digging, if you will. But whatever, that's besides the point. 2013, there was offseason hype when the Houston Texans signed one of the greatest players in recent NFL history. What? I'm not lying, Sean. Ed Reed.
Oh, yeah.
There was hype for that.
Current Bethune-Cookman head coach.
By the way, I'm not making fun of the Texans. I'm just saying Sean Payton remotely being interested in this team ranks pretty high as far as off-season moments of hype for this franchise. There's no sarcasm. There's no messing around with you. This is legitimate. 2016, was anyone really excited about the Brock Osweiler signing? I was sort of like, all right, we'll see. I don't think I was excited because I remember watching him in that game. I think it was against the New England Patriots in like Sunday Night Football, and I was like, what's this? This guy's not that good. But then the Broncos came back because they ran for a bunch of touchdowns, and they had like a punt return touchdown too, or a muff punt or something like that. 2017, here's some hype. Tony Romo says the Texans were his top choice if he played again, but the Texans didn't sign him. And
I forgot about that.
It was a thing.
That was
I remember.
a crazy 2 months.
That was in March. Yeah, but let's go from Brock Osweiler to Tony Romo.
Talk about cooked Tony Romo.
Tony Romo, I think, was more broken than cooked. Tony Romo just kept on getting hurt.
I mean, Peyton was cooked because of his neck. Romo was cooked because of his back.
Given the offensive line the Texans had going into that season,
Who would have gotten murdered?
he would have died. Yes, he would have absolutely died. Oh, my bonitis!
Deshaun Watson almost got murdered.
Yes, he did. And that's what I remember from 2017, being told by somebody that we need to have a mobile quarterback behind the worst offensive line in the NFL. Quote. Oh, and they traded up in the draft for Deshaun Watson. That's honestly, as far as moments of offseason hype, there's a team in town in 2002 and in 2017 trading up in the draft to get Deshaun Watson. Those are the two most hype-worthy moments in Houston Texans offseason history. And I think Sean Payton is third. I'm not trying to make fun here. I'm just establishing what we all know. This franchise has had a depressing history, but this is a moment to be excited about. Do not beat yourself up for being excited about it, for being hopeful, for thinking that maybe some good moments are ahead. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think it would be smart for the Houston Texans to trade that 12th pick for Sean Payton if that's all it takes. And all you draft pick people, you need to shut up. You just do. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, well, they could get Klondike mixed Flipplebutt in the 12th pick, the wide receiver out of South Louisiana Tech State. Cool. I don't care. All you people online, too, that are doing, these mock drafts right now, shut up. No one cares. No one cares.